Good morning, New York City. Welcome to Doc NYC. My name is Tom Powers. I'm the artistic director of the festival. I want to say some important thank yous to our leadership sponsor, HBO Documentary Films, our major sponsors, A&E Indie Films and Netflix, our supporting sponsors, Sundance Now Doc Club, our leading media sponsors, New York Magazine and WNET, and a big thanks to the Doc NYC staff and volunteers. Let's hear it for the volunteers, please. So this is the second, I guess, of our Doc NYC Pro Days. Yesterday, our theme was first-time filmmaking. Today is our day called Pitch Day. If you didn't get up to the Doc NYC Pro Lounge, I encourage you to enjoy that if you're a badge holder. I encourage you to pick up a Doc NYC Pro calendar and enjoy as much as you can of the next 6 days. 7 including today. This weekend we've got 6 great master classes on topics like cinematography, editing, podcasting, international co-productions. The international co-productions even has a reception afterwards with real alcohol in the Doc NYC Pro Lounge, so don't miss the international co-productions master class tomorrow. Today is our day devoted to pitch days, but to kind of start this off, I wanted to focus on something a little bit unpitch-like. I wanted to focus on 15 filmmakers who have got through their pitch, got through their producing, come out on the other end with some of the biggest standout films of the year. We did this 2 years ago with our Doc NYC shortlist. Back then the shortlist was only 10 films. Now we've expanded to 15. So 2 years ago I had 9 directors on stage, and I thought, that's insane. I'll never do that again. And then people encouraged me, you should do that again. So here we are doing it again with a little bit of a different format. I'm going to bring 5 directors to stage at a time, kind of thematically grouped. When I took a look at the short list this year, I realized that there was kind of 5 films that are sort of loosely grouped as biographies. There's 5 films that could be loosely categorized as observational, and there's 5 films that are kind of investigative or historical. And so that's the way we're going to present these filmmakers today. So consider this like a live essay. We're writing a live essay together about what happened in documentary filmmaking in 2015. In the questions that I'm asking our panelists today, really talking about craft. I'm not, there are many other conversations that are going to be had in the next week about funding documentaries and distributing documentaries, but today I really want to talk, have a chance to ask each of these directors just a little piece about the craft of their filmmaking, and that I hope by the end of this 90 minutes we'll kind of, you can put together in your own mind a mosaic of what's going on in documentary filmmaking today. So our first group of directors is Liz Garbus, the director of What Happened, Miss Simone. That film plays Tuesday. Next to Liz is Morgen Neville, who with his co-director Robert Gordon made Best of Enemies. And Morgen will be here tomorrow when his film plays at 2 p.m. Next to Morgen is Asif Kapadia, the director of Amy. Amy had a screening last night and plays again on Tuesday. Next to Asif Kapadia is Brett Morgen, the director of Kurt Cobain, Montage of Heck. His film played yesterday, and I think it has another screening. His Kurt Cobain, Montage of Heck plays tonight at 10 p.m. So it will be played loud, I can assure you that. And then on the end is a first-time documentary filmmaker. We welcome him to the fold, Ethan Hawke, the director of Seymour, An Introduction. And Ethan is going to be back here tomorrow with Seymour Bernstein, the fabulous subject of his film, tomorrow at noon. So I hope you can join some of that. So Liz, I'm going to start with you. Your film, What Happened, Miss Simone, this is an incredible film about Nina Simone, who had a tumultuous life, to say the least. And lots of films this year are dealing with music. But when you told a story that's about a musician, but it's a much more layered story than just playing music. How did you approach using Nina Simone's music in your film?
Thanks for having me start. The film is structured as a musical, and the film and the music is a narrative element in the same way that the audio tapes of Nina telling her life story is an element of the narrative structure of the film. And the songs are also that. Nina did a combination of original music as well as her own composition and writing. But even if it was a cover of something like "Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood" or "Porgy," they're highly, highly, highly personal pieces. So the songs themselves did storytelling work. Whether it be her, Porgy for falling in love with the main love of her life, or of course, Mississippi Goddamn, Young Gifted and Black, Backlash Blues, her civil rights involvement. The songs were part of the storytelling, the spine of the movie.
Something that every filmmaker faces when using music is that a lot of creative decisions can be dictated by financial decisions or what is available to you. Was there a trickiness to negotiating that? Like, I'd like to use this song to tell this, but I can't for some reason because it's not available to me, or?
Well, I had really great producers who kind of kept me out of a lot of the music rights negotiations, and so I was really quite free in the edit room to use what I wanted to, and only very, very late on would I hear that there had been some issue with something that they worked out. So I had that freedom in there. There was maybe one song that we didn't end up using that I really, really wanted to use, which was "For Women." But in general, we were able to work with all the stakeholders and use all the music I wanted to use. And again, the music was, when I see music documentaries, I love to hear the music play, and I think that all of us did that here, where you actually get to sit and enjoy the artist's work, as opposed to it's just an example A of something. It's actually, it's the core, the heart of the film, and so I wanted to give that of Nina to the audience as well.
A last question I want to ask you is, someone who was, I think, involved with your film was Nina's daughter. Am I right that she had a kind of executive producing role?
Right.
And one thing that really stands out about Nina's daughter in this film is she's so clear-eyed about her mother. Often you find the offspring of someone very talented, either extremely harsh or painting them, looking at them through rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
And she does, she pays tribute to her mother and yet is clear-eyed about her flaws. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about navigating the complex character that is Nina Simone?
Okay, well, those are two different questions. Nina's daughter, she a lot of therapy.
I ask you to talk into the microphone.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Not a sound person.
A lot of therapy. Nina's daughter did come to a sort of an extraordinary place of both appreciation of her mother's genius and her struggle, as well as sort of a clear-eyed view of the kind of the brutality of a lot of her childhood. So to be able to kind of balance both of those feelings is quite extraordinary, and I'm not sure I've reached that yet. And I think that Nina's obviously a very complex figure. I haven't reached that yet with my own parents, and I think that we all have to kind of come to that where we love and honor, and also kind of have a clear view of the things that went wrong. I think that Nina was the name of the film. What Happened, Miss Simone, is a question, and the film doesn't answer that question with one answer. What happened, Miss Simone, is everything. What happened, Miss Simone, was a classical dream that was thwarted by an all-white exclusive classical music field. What happened, Miss Simone, was Jim Crow. What happened, Miss Simone, was clearly a tendency towards bipolar. What happened, Miss Simone, was a marriage that was filled with dysfunction and violence. And so all of these things are what happened and made her who she was, and also made her a survivor. She is somebody who survived all of this So the balancing all of those factors was the challenge and the joy of making the film, and trying to experience her as let the audience experience her as complex as I found her. And Brett's going to be funny, and I wasn't funny, so. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know.
Well, listen, if you haven't seen What Happened to Simone, or even I've seen it a few times now, and it repays rewatching. It'll be showing here on Tuesday, and Liz will be here to talk more about it. Morgen, Neville, I want to go to you and your collaboration with Robert Gordon on Best of Enemies. So in your film, you're looking at these famous 1968 debates between William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal, two polarizing figures. You've said in interviews that one of your first jobs was working as an intern at The Nation magazine, working for Gore Vidal, fact-checking Gore Vidal, which is like a thankless task if I ever heard one. And I mean, I take away from that biographical detail that maybe you went into the film between thinking of those polarized figures, maybe slightly tilted towards Gore. Maybe I'm wrong, but how did you, in facing these incredibly polarizing figures, how did you and Robert keep a balance between them?
I mean, balance was the key element for the entire film. Not, yes, I'm liberal, but taking a stand wasn't the point of the film. We decided from the very beginning that the film was not about the arguments, it was about how we argue. And as soon as we got mired in the arguments, we were lost. And we also decided from the beginning that we were not making a documentary about these two men, we were making a documentary about a relationship. We thought about it like a Venn diagram with these two lives, because they both had these incredible lives that could fill and have filled many books and documentaries, and there were so many great things that we were tempted to use, but we had to keep reminding ourselves, this is really just about that moment where these two lives interconnect, and whatever connects those two lives is what we need to focus on. And I think, having people seen, having this film screened, with very liberal crowds at the Nation magazine and at the Heritage Foundation, I thought was actually an accomplishment for us. Because for me, this was really a film about trying to figure out, can we at least agree about common principles of discourse in our country? What is the common ground? Can we at least agree you should have a more elevated debate, not what we see on television now, almost weekly with these presidential debates? Can we at least decide what's right for our country? And in a way, I felt for a long time this kind of lack of adults in our politics, and I feel like this film was kind of trying to get back to that core of where did we take the wrong path on this road.
I hope your film solves that problem.
I'm sure we have.
Let me ask you this: when facing confronting a biographical film, there's a choice to be made. Like, are we going to tell the whole story of this person, or are we going to take a chapter in the life of this person? In Best of Enemies, you're really taking a chapter of the lives of these people, but it also opens the question: well, how much do we need to tell about the rest of their lives in order to educate the audience or to make it interesting? Can you talk about how you grappled with that?
Sure. I mean, I think we could make a whole trilogy of films just about Gore Vidal and his enemies. You could do Gore Vidal and Truba Capote, Gore Vidal and Norman Mailer. They're each documentaries. So, I think it was really important for us to, again, remind ourselves that we were not trying to tell the whole story. At the same time, we were trying to figure out how much previous knowledge did people have and did they need to get the story. And what we realized were people under 40, roughly, pretty much had no idea who either writer was, which was kind of scary for me. But then realizing that we had to give kind of a basic sketch of who they were. And what made it easy in our case is they had the same upbringing in many ways, this kind of mirrored life. So even that played into their relationship with each other, because in a way they were kind of distorted mirror images of one another.
Well, if you haven't seen, how many people have seen Best of Enemies? All right. Well, those of you who haven't seen it, it'll be playing again tomorrow, Saturday at noon, or at, 2 p.m. And I know all this right up here. It's like a trap. Is Robert Gordon going to be here tomorrow too?
Nope.
No. So Morgen, Neville. Asif, Kapadia. I just want to give credit to Robert because
for sure. He's at the Napa Film Festival this weekend.
Gotcha.
So if you're in Napa, I think he's eating and drinking well this weekend.
Asif, Kapadia. Amy follows your previous film, Senna. Both of these films are notable for being constructed visually entirely with archival material. There's no cutaways to modern interviews. So having done that with Senna, when you approached Amy, did you know you were going to do that with Amy?
Hi, morning. No, I didn't. I kind of the look of a film always comes after kind of getting into the material. Senna actually started, it had an interesting point when that film started. I agreed to do it, and then it took like a year or 9 months of waiting for kind of contracts and deals to be done. So I started turning down other work because I wanted to do it, and I just started looking at material, doing my research. And I realize now it was during that 9 months of waiting when I couldn't actually hire anyone, I couldn't hire an editor, that the idea of doing it entirely out of archive came out of that period. Because I just looked at the footage and thought, well, there's a really interesting middle, there's a really interesting ending, I don't know where it begins, but I think it might all be here actually. I might be an idiot, but I think it's all here. I mean, it's great. And then by then I could be quite rigid, and I'd started cutting it. So I had an assembly by the time we started the film. And then I could be quite strong by saying, I don't think I need talking heads and we screened the film a lot. With Amy, it was because of Senna that people approached me to do Amy. But with Amy, this footage didn't exist. What did exist was most of it was horrible material of her looking really bad, lots of bad performances, lots of bad concerts. With Senna, everyone wanted to talk about him because everyone loved him. With Amy, nobody wanted to talk about her. Nobody wanted to get involved. Nobody trusted filmmakers, journalists, paparazzi. I could just be a paparazzi person as far as they were concerned. So it was really hard because there was no way in. So then I came up with the idea of doing the opposite. Rather than starting with the visuals, it was just, let me just talk to people. If you give me 5 minutes, just the two of us privately, somewhere safe, not in a cafe in Soho where everyone knows one another and people are paranoid about who's listening in. If we go somewhere safe and secure and we just sit down and we talk, if you want to leave after 5 minutes, that's fine. If you want to stay longer, we can talk. But I don't want to sit there taking notes, so I will record it. And unless you give me permission, I can't use it. And what would invariably happen was a half an hour conversation would become an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours of therapy, really. We'd look at it afterwards and go, that was really weird, that was really emotional. I didn't really like the lighting in the room, so I used to turn the lights off pretty much. So we would talk in the dark and just audio, and no one else was around, and it became a fairly safe place for people to just open up about their story and their relationship and their part of Amy's story. And then they would all go away and talk to their friends and say, maybe you should just meet him for 5 minutes. And so Amy totally began out of audio. And then later on, it became a question of what can we show? And I just found her face and her look cinematic. I just want to look at her. I just want to understand what people are saying by seeing her eyes and seeing how her body changes and her hair's changing. And so it became fairly early on, I thought, I don't need to see these other people. One, because they don't want to be seen. They're not comfortable being filmed. Two, I'm only interested in her. And she's always so expressive. When she's really happy and up, or when she's really down, there's always something going on. So that's kind of really how it happened. I'm kind of stubborn, so even if I don't know if the footage exists, I'll kind of say this is going to be the technique, and we just figure out how to do it. With Amy, there is drone footage, and there is aerial footage, and there's material that I shot. The aerial footage came from a film I was doing for the London Olympics at the time when I got the phone call, and I just kind of nicked it from that film. We didn't have money for helicopter footage in this. So there is
like archival footage. It was shot for some other reason.
Yeah.
You put it on
See?
YouTube and then appropriated it for yourself.
Exactly. Even if it's my own stuff. Yeah. That's kind of how it came about.
Do you feel like now, having done 2 films this way, that you have an appetite for it? I mean, does
have an appetite, certainly. But yeah, I think to make these sorts of films, I find.
Like, do you think in your head, I wonder what other subject would have that much footage out there?
The tangential answer is that I've previously made fiction films, and I come from an art school background, so I come from a very visual background. I kind of think visually. And part of the reason I wanted to make documentaries was to go away from like the obsession of when shooting drama, the perfection of a frame and texture and all of this sort of stuff, and actually say, what if I make a film where I have no control over the footage? Can you still tell a story? Can you emotionally engage an audience? And so it was almost like a test on Senna to say, I'm not in control of it. Can you still tell a story? And so I find kind of both aspects interesting. But it all depends on the subject. The style of a film should always come out.
Like if that shot was out of focus, not my fault.
I love the freedom of imperfection. I think that's the problem sometimes with movies. Big studio films are, for me, terribly boring because they're obsessed with kind of everything being perfect. And I've just been working with an editor, and he kept going on about things going slightly out of focus. I don't care. It's real. It's there. It happened. No, who cares? If you're emotionally in the right place, that's all that matters. And so it's been quite freeing in a way, not being in control of that. Of course, every frame is chosen, is maybe reframed or zoomed in or slowed down or freeze frames. There's all of the techniques of directing that come into working with archive. It doesn't mean you just pick it up and chuck it in. A lot of work goes into it. And in fact, Amy, the kind of online editor, said it's the most complicated film he's ever worked on, of all kind of big studio type films as well that he's done, because all of the work happens in the post rather than when you're shooting it. So actually there's a hell of a lot going on. It should just feel invisible. It shouldn't take you out of the movie. That's the main thing.
Brett, want to talk about Kurt Cobain, Montage of Hawke. One thing that is evident to anyone watching this film, there's all kinds of visual sources that you're drawing from. There's interviews that you shot. There's home movies that you found of Kurt Cobain that have never been seen before. And also very distinctly, there's use of animation in segments, something you've done before in your film, The Chicago 10. I'm really interested to know how you work with animators, how you get what you are looking for from another person that way.
Well, I don't think animation is any different than anybody else on the crew. And I think the singular challenge of a director is to sort of unite everybody on your team with your vision for the film. And what makes these type of movies really challenging is that the aesthetic that is, my films aren't so much about the subject, they're intended to be the experience of the subject. So I'm approaching a film like The Kid Stays in the Picture to everything in my mind is trying to create the experience of Evans. What music would he listen to? How would he cut it? So that's why The Kid Stays in the Picture is all dissolves and Montage is all straight cuts. Even the cutting is a reflection of the subject, and the style of cutting. So the goal ultimately becomes to try to unite all of the department heads with the aesthetic of the subject. And so particularly on Montage, what was really challenging was like the Jeff Dana, who I've worked with for years, the composer I work with, was like he couldn't do arrangements like Jeff Dana. He would have to do arrangements in the sort of aesthetic of Kurt. And the same thing was with Stefan Nadelman, who's an amazing animator. And if you've seen Being Evil, I think he did incredible work in Being Evil, and it looks nothing like the work he did in Montage of Hawke. I think so I don't know if I answered your question, Tom.
So when you're working with an illustrator like that, do you start with sketches before they go off and do the hard work? Or?
I think ephemera. The way I like to think of it is, some people see a piece of paper as a piece of paper. I look at it like walking onto a sound stage, and there's a set of a house, and no one's placed the lights, and nobody's placed the camera. And that same house can be a haunted house, or it could be Morning in America. And so a piece of paper from Kurt's journals can be nothing more than a piece of paper. Or as a director, you can approach it to give it the texture and the ambiance that sort of embraces the emotion of the moment. And so for Montage, all of the stuff Stefan had to work with, all of the journals were shot 90 degrees, 1-to-1 lighting. So all of the manipulation was in post. And again, it's just working very closely. I mean, we moved Stefan into our office from Portland, so we can. There's no difference in how one works with an animator than an editor. What I'm getting at, Tom, is there's no difference between working with the animators or the editors or the composers or the sound designers.
And if you want to see Kurt Cobain, as I said, is playing tonight here at 10 p.m. Ethan Hawke, your film Seymour: An Introduction is, I think people sometimes refer to it as a quiet film. I mean, it's this interview profile of this incredible man, had been a successful concert pianist several decades ago, walked away from that to become a music teacher. You know, one of the questions kind of grappled with in this film is, you know, what is art? Why do we do it? It's a question that you came to ask, that you were asking about your own life when you met Seymour, as you describe in the film. And so when you met Seymour, you made a decision, I'd like to start filming this guy. What did you think it was going to be, and how did it get to be what it became?
I guess I met this man at a dinner party, and he was so clearly self-possessed and interested in the people around him that it was a little startling, a little bit like how one might feel when meeting somebody who was, I mean, he would roll his eyes, but I mean, there was something slightly enlightened about him. There was something penetrating about him, and he keyed into my problem immediately and was very interested in it and extremely helpful. And in a lot of ways, I started the documentary as an excuse to spend more time with him. You know, and then on another level, I thought, well, this is a real privilege that I'm getting, because he invited me to sit and listen to him play. He hadn't played in 50 years for people, and I thought, I think other people would enjoy this. I mean, I felt a very privileged seat, and so I had a suspicion through that there was a chance filming him could turn into something like Zen and the Art of Archery. So I've long had the theory that the arts were all the same, and that even being a mechanic is probably similar to the arts. You know, that inside doing anything well is the secret to doing everything well. You know, and that this film that we were doing could turn out to be about that, because I had read Seymour's book and I knew that was part of his thesis. You know, that through practicing well, practicing the piano well, you could teach yourself how to have a better life. That's pretty much his thesis and teaching, and it corresponded with what I wanted to be thinking about.
Now, Seymour, when he stepped away from being a concert pianist, it seems to me that part of that was a kind of ambivalence about performing in public, and ambivalence about seeking that kind of attention, and I wonder how that ambivalence relates to being in a film. Did he have any reticence to being filmed?
No, not at all. He would say, I've waited 88 years to be a movie star. This is fantastic. And he had no reticence about it. Wait, there was another part of your question, though, that I really did want to answer, but I made myself go blank on it. What did you ask me again?
I was referring to his ambivalence when he was a...
Oh, yeah. Well, he said this amazing thing to me, which nobody had ever said to me, which is he wasn't sure having a successful career was a good thing. And I was... My whole life, everybody's been obsessed with succeeding.
When you look at these five films collectively, it's a big question that arises, is whether having...
You know, if you take Amy or Kurt, look at Elvis, and what Seymour started talking about was Glenn Gould or Marlon Brando, about this obsession with society's perception of success when it's not corresponding with your own development as a person, tends to make people very uncomfortable and put them in a tremendous amount of pain. And I think a lot of us see that in our own life. While it's not hyperbolized to the extent that some people are, we're out of step with ourselves, you know, and we're tripping over that. And so how do we fully actualize ourselves and accept whatever direction that takes us? That to me was really interesting.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow, Seymour, an introduction will be playing here at noon. Ethan and Seymour Bernstein will be here. I'm going to ask our 5 panelists to swap seats with our next 5. Thank you very much, Liz Garbus, Morgen Neville, Asif Kapadia, Brett Morgen, and Ethan Hawke. I'm going to bring up Crystal Moselle, Davis Guggenheim, Matthew Heineman. Who else have I got in this? Joshua Oppenheimer, and Kim Longinotto. Matthew, Kim Longinotto, take the stage. Joshua Oppenheimer in the house. Joshua's there. Okay, great. All right. Who do I want to start with? Kim Longinotto. I'm going to start with you. Yesterday we had our Visionaries tribute lunch. Kim Longinotto was the recipient of the 2nd annual Robert and Ann Drew Award for her remarkable body of work, and especially her new film, Dreamcatcher, which is going to be playing tonight at 7 o'clock. Also, Kim has a film in our Docs Redux section. Her extraordinary film, Sisters-in-Law, is going to be playing tomorrow, Saturday at 11:45 a.m. I think that might be at IFC Center. Take a look at the calendar. So, Kim, in Dreamcatcher, you follow this extraordinary woman, Brenda, former prostitute who has had a very rugged life, now dedicates her life to getting other women off the streets. So much happens in this film. There are scenes in that film that I'll never forget. And I want to ask something about your technique, because as I understand your technique, you go in and you film for 10 weeks, and kind of, as I understand it, pretty rigorously 10 weeks. So you don't add an extra 10 weeks. Can you talk about that approach?
It's 10 weeks because that's normally the length of time I can manage to squeeze out of whoever's producing it. In fact, Teddy Leifer, who was one of the 2 producers, said you can have 7, and I had to say, no, I need 10. But 10 seems good because if you're with somebody for every day, all the time, like we were with Brenda, 10 weeks has a sort of limit to it. I mean, we were there when she was in the bathroom putting her makeup on, when she didn't have any clothes on, and we'd be there when she woke up or she was in bed, and she kind of welcomed us in. But I think if it was open-ended, I mean, I wouldn't want somebody to be that close to me for
10 minutes, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh,
but
no,
for me,
I would love it, but because I love having people around me. But yeah, actually, I was thinking of something, just a couple of little thoughts out of what just happened, because Liz said something like, we have to honor and love our parents. And I was so pleased to see Ethan there, because that dad you like in Boyhood, I don't know if anyone else has seen Boyhood, but the succession of other fathers that come into that kid's life, I wouldn't want to honor or love any of them. And those of us here, there must be lots of us here who didn't honor or love our parents. We're not weird, you know. And I think those are the sort of feelings I want people to take away from the film. So it wasn't a random comment, you know, that you follow Brenda and you think, okay, she's come from that. Maybe I'm not completely in tune with my own life, or maybe there's things I'm not happy about. But if she's managed to get through that, then I can get through my much more minor problems. You know, it's not just somebody taking you in for the sake of it. It's so that hopefully when an audience see the film, they'll relate to something. Well, we've all been kids, so that's why I love Boyhood. And we all have that weird feeling of confusion, and we don't quite know what's going on, or people have so much power and we don't have any. And I think that's what Brenda's story is. You start off with absolutely no power. I mean, she was forced into cars with men at the age of 11, 12. And then you get yourself together and you become something and you become a survivor. But at the same time, you're never entirely, there. You're always trying to get there. And that's why I loved everything Ethan said, because it was like, you're never actually there. You're always slightly out of step with the persona you have. And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in contradiction. not that somebody seems one thing and that's what they are, that they can be one thing and another. And because I think all of us are. Some of us are better at covering up than others, but I think all of us are massive insecurities and but also hopes and fears of, I think not so much wanting success, because that's, but a terrible fear of fucking up, that's what we all have.
We all have that.
All documentaries have that, And when you meet another person that you admire, a filmmaker, and they say, "Oh, I have it too," it's such a relief, When someone says you must
Raise your hand if you have a fear of fucking up. Okay, so this is all right. So
yeah, it's not just me. I love you guys. It's so nice. We're all just as
I want to go to Davis Guggenheim. His film, He Named Me Malala, is playing today here at 2:45. So, Davis, you're following the incredible Nobel Prize winner Malala
Yousafzai.
Yeah, Yousafzai. When I interviewed her at Toronto, I got it right, but got a lot of names to remember here. So Malala is someone who's had a lot of cameras pointed at her, probably mostly people coming in, spending a day with her and going out. In making your film, you spent a lot of time with her. Given that she's someone who has a lot of demands on her time from media, how did you navigate that? Was that tricky to navigate getting access to her?
Well, before I answer that, I want to thank you for bringing us together. As I sit here, I think about all of us who started our movies, and we did it alone mostly, with our little tribe of crew, and we never come together. And it's kind of it's also a little bit terrifying, but it's also very therapeutic to just sit amongst people who've just been through what we've been through, and it's very moving and kind of intense and therapeutic. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for being here.
It's funny when Asif was talking about Amy and how you came to that solution of bringing the people who were reluctant. I do something very similar for different reasons, but I showed up at Malala's house by myself. I rang her doorbell.
Did she know you were coming?
She knew I was coming. Yes, she did. It was an appointment, but I do this now with every movie I make. I show up with just a audio and no crew and no cameras. She has this little office, like it's a closet with a desk, and I just said, "Let's talk." And I have no notes, and I have no agenda, and honestly, it's just the idea for me is to wander, and talk. And after it was supposed to be an hour, it was 3 hours, and then I did the same thing with her father. And both of them, who have given a lot of interviews, said, "We told you things we've never told anybody," and it becomes very emotional, and it becomes very.
And so let's pause on that for a second. Do you think that was I'm certainly some of that giving up information to you must be a testament to your skills as a filmmaker, but do you think it's also kind of a testament to just like being around to like?
Well, it also starts your relationship very differently. Imagine if you're meeting someone for the first time, and you're bringing with them 10 people, like lights and cameras, and that just immediately, if you start that way. And I imagine for us, I don't know, but if you had those exact same interviews and there were cameras and crew there, they might have wanted to, even if they were willing, they might have wanted to say the same thing, but maybe the way they said it would be very different. And so I ended up doing maybe 15 audio interviews with Malala and her father, because I'm looking for quiet, introspective.
I'm curious, because now you're saying that, it's making me wonder, my memory of the film, is that stuff used in the film, or was that stuff a kind of bedrock that you went back?
Mostly, and the film has a lot of animation in it because they were telling stories of things. Battle where she got her name 100 years ago. She's named after a girl who spoke out. She's like a Joan of Arc character. She spoke out to rally the Afghanis to beat the British, and she's killed for speaking out. And the irony of the fact that she ends up speaking out and is almost killed for speaking out. How did her father name her that, and why did she become this person? It was so important, but I didn't know how to. So I said, "Oh, we have to build an animation company." So. That's how we did that. But
You call up Brett for advice?
Actually we did. We built an animation company in my office.
Is it still working?
We're looking for work if anyone has any money.
All right, I want to move to Crystal Moselle. Her film, The Wolfpack, is going to play on Monday at 9:30 here. She'll be here with some members of the Wolfpack, some members. So if
as many as I can get.
how many people have seen the Wolfpack? All right. So if you haven't, you'll catch up as I ask at this question. Crystal, you were filming this family whose patriarch had done everything he could to shut them off from the rest of the world. You've described in interviews that you met these boys on the street, a kind of chance encounter, one of their rare forays out into the world, and then you got to get into their apartment where they had lived in kind of seclusion for all their lives, and filmed for several years. Can you talk about getting into that apartment and given that the father in that family had tried to keep them separated from the outside world, how did you manage to overcome his resistance?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because getting into the apartment was the easiest part.
It was getting out.
Still in there, actually. When I first met them, the power had completely shifted within the household. So the boys really were.
And when you say that the power shifted, would like the very act that they had met this camera person who was coming in, was that what shifted the power, or were there other dynamics already?
So there was an incident that happened that shifted the power between the boys and their father. So, and it literally was like, it was flipped. So the boys gained all that power, and they were calling the shots, and their father didn't have any say with anything. So when I came into the family situation, I didn't know about that power shift. I didn't know anything about their backstory. All I knew is that they're these really driven, amazing young boys that were interested in filmmaking. And I was excited about that. I was excited about those like insane costumes they're making. And so I came in just really interested in their art, and I didn't know about their father and what he'd done to them in their life. So the trust really was built through spending time together and getting to know each other and them opening up to me about their backstory.
Now you make a real choice in this film. You kind of put us in their worlds. You're really putting us in their worlds. A different filmmaker might have approached this with, sitting them down for interviews, asking them questions like that. Can you talk about arriving at that choice and why you arrived at that choice?
I mean, it was instinctual and organic, the way that I, approached this film. I came in and I just observed and hung out and was there, and especially like when interviewing the father, it was every day was different. Some days I would just walk through the hallway and he would ask me to come in his room and start talking to him, and I think that there was too much pressure to say, let's sit down and let's do an interview. I tried that a couple times and it never worked with most of the family at first. As time went by, the first 2 years I didn't do any interviews with family. It was more casual, fly on the wall, just observing and being there. And then as time went by, we started to do more sit-down interviews. But
now, 2 years is a long time. Like by after a year, did you have in your head, I'm making a film here, and did you know what that film was going to be?
No, I knew I was going to make a film. When the minute I saw them on the street, I knew I was going to make a film.
Kim would have been there 10 weeks.
Yeah, I knew that there was something there, and I didn't know what it was, but I have a lot of patience, I guess, and I just stuck with it, and when it started to shape itself, I was able to kind of plan things out a little bit more. But I think that especially with the father, I just had to just wait and see what he was going to give me. and I didn't want to push.
Well, it's a great story, and I hope people can come back and see it with the Angiulo brothers on Monday at 9:30. Joshua Oppenheimer, you were here 2 years ago when we did our other shortlist discussion with your film, The Act of Killing. Now you're back here with The Look of Silence. In The Look of Silence, you're following this extraordinary character, Adi, whose brother was killed over 40 years ago during the genocide that took place in Indonesia. Now Adi works as a ophthalmologist and goes out and uses his career as a doctor to confront some of the killers and families of killers who live nearby him, and you're there witnessing those encounters. In fact, I think you and Adi were so close that you were kind of collaborating on setting up those encounters, if I'm not mistaken. Can you talk about can you just take us into one of an example of those encounters? Because every time I think about it, I think about the intensity of being in that moment, of being with someone who's confronting a killer. There's a layer. I wonder if there's a layer of potential danger. Like once this killer realizes, this former killers realize someone is asking tough questions of them. I know ultimately before you released the film, before you showed the film in festivals, you had Adi moved from his village to an undisclosed location. Talk to us about what those situations were like.
Well, it's first important to say that The Look of Silence is really the film I initially set out to make, and to make with Adi and his family. Adi, all the way back in 2003, was gathering survivors to tell me their stories, and after 3 weeks, the army threatened all of them not to participate. So Adi called me to a midnight meeting in his parents' home, the home you see in the film, and said, please don't give up, try to film the perpetrators. And that led to over time, led to the act of killing, and throughout that process, Adi would watch everything we had time to show him for 7 years of shooting with perpetrators. And when I returned in 2012 to make The Look of Silence, it was after we'd edited The Act of Killing, but before it had its first screening, at which point I knew I couldn't safely return to Indonesia at all. And Adi, when I returned, said, I've spent 7 years watching your footage. I need to meet the men who killed my brother now. I need to confront them. And I immediately said, absolutely not, because of the danger you mentioned. There's never before, to my knowledge, been a film where survivors of atrocities are confronting perpetrators while the perpetrators still hold a monopoly on power, because it's too dangerous. And Adi then actually showed me on a little camera I'd given him the one scene in The Look of Silence which he shot, which is the scene that comes near the end where his father's crawling through the house calling for help. And he said, I filmed, the moment I started filming this, I realized I was witnessing the day that it's too late, witnessing the day that it's too late for my father to heal. He's forgotten the son whose murder destroyed our family's life, but he cannot forget the fear. And now he'll never be able to work through it because he can't remember what happened. So I need to, and millions of survivors will die in this prison of fear. And I don't want my children to inherit this from my father, my mother, and from me. And as a parent, I owe it to my children to try and reconcile with the neighbors of whom we're all terrified. And I was moved, and then my crew first of all pointed out, Joshua, the production of The Act of Killing was so well known across this region because you were working with the most powerful men in the country, the vice president, national paramilitary leaders, and so on. These men Adi wants to confront are only regionally powerful, and they won't dare even detain you, let alone physically attack you, because of that, and because nobody had seen The Act of Killing yet. So I was still believed to be their friend, the friends of these powerful people. Anyways, when we would arrive for the confrontation, sometimes people would say, oh, Adi is giving these eye tests, and that's how we gained access to do the confrontations. Of course, that's not true. I'd filmed with the perpetrators years earlier, so I would bring Adi to the perpetrators he wanted to meet, and I would say, I'm back after all of these years, this time with a close friend who has his own personal relationship to this history, a different one from yours, and I hope you'll just listen to each other, because I was hoping Adi would get this reconciliation he was hoping for, although I doubted it. And I told Adi, I think we'll be documenting a series of failures. But if I can show why these confrontations fail with precision and intimacy, then we can make visible the prison of fear in which everyone's living. We can show how urgently truth, justice, and reconciliation are needed. So once I said, just try to listen to each other, I also said, Adi's an optometrist, and if you might have any question about your eyesight, he'll test your eyes, and we'll give you as many pairs of glasses as you need. And that served many functions. First of all, it created an instant intimacy between Adi and the people he had to talk to, and it disarmed them. You're not likely to attack your eye doctor. And if you've ever sat in a bar, I don't wear glasses, and I haven't been to a barber in a long time because I can honestly do this myself. But if you've ever, I remember going to the barber years ago before I got my natural haircut, that you can sit in the barber and you'll open up if the barber's chatty. And so Adi was able to use the eye test to lure from the perpetrators all of the crucial details that he needed them to tell him, so that he could then turn the tables after the eye test and reveal who he is and confront them. And then, of course, the perpetrators would go from boasting and declaiming their responsibility to denying it. And we would always have a getaway car available for Adi, so the moment we were finished shooting, he could leave, usually unbeknownst to the perpetrator. Adi's family was at the airport during every confrontation, apart from the first one, where Adi doesn't reveal who he is, so that they could, so they were able to evacuate if anything went wrong. And then, very quickly, we had to work one day at a time. I mean, we had to shoot these confrontations almost back to back, so that whereas the act of killing took 5 years to shoot, this took 3 weeks.
So Davis set up his own animation studio. You set up your own special forces unit to evacuation.
We were really, I mean, people would always ask me, wasn't the act of killing frightening to make because I was filming with such powerful perpetrators? The act of killing was emotionally frightening to make, but very rarely physically frightening, because the army would roll out a red carpet for everything we were doing with the perpetrators. But the moment I started filming with Adi, as was true nearly a decade earlier, it was always physically frightening, but it was emotionally healing.
Well, let me turn to Matthew Heineman, the director of Cartel Land. But let me just say, if you want to see The Look of Killing, it's playing today at 5 p.m. Joshua will be here for a longer conversation after that, so I hope you can. Talking about films that are frightening to film, it certainly looks that way when I watch Cartel Land. Matthew Heineman, you've said to me in interviews that you didn't really have background as a combat journalist. Yet in Cartel Land, you are putting yourself in situations and filming gunfights and other really hairy situations in Mexico with militias fighting drug cartels. Although as the film unfolds, maybe those militias are borderline drug cartels themselves. Did I just give away the end? No, sorry.
Thank you.
Mexico, we all know, is an incredibly difficult place to perform journalism. There's a shockingly high death toll of journalists there. Can you talk about putting yourself in that situation, given that that was a kind of a new thing for you as a filmmaker?
Sure, yeah. First, I just want to say thank you for having us, and it's a huge honor to be here with this group of filmmakers, many of whom inspired me to get into filmmaking in the first place. So I just want to say that first. For me, there's been so much coverage of the drug wars, of narco violence, and I really wanted to put a human face to it. I wanted to put myself right in the middle of the action to see how everyday people were affected by this violence, the response of everyday people rising up to fight back, and then the ramifications of what happens when citizens take the law into their own hands. And it was an absolutely terrifying journey. I ended up with a story that I never could have imagined. At first, as these citizens rose up, especially on the Mexican side of the story, I thought it was this very simple sort of hero-villain story. But over time, the lines between good and evil became ever more blurry. and I almost became obsessed with trying to understand, who these guys were and where this story was going to end.
So there's an extraordinary character that's at the center of your film. I'm not going to try to give too much away about him, but he's one of the most charismatic people I've seen in any documentary this year. He's the leader of a militia, and as the film goes on, we get a more complicated view of him, and that I think is a result of the strong rapport that you had developed with him, and your skill as a filmmaker of continuing to follow him. Can you talk about it's one thing to meet a militia leader who says let me show you the great things I'm doing, but then it's a different thing to kind of get in deeper with him and watch him sort of reveal other sides of himself. Can you talk about that transition from kind of covering him as any journalist might to covering him more from the inside?
Yeah, well, I first heard about the story in a Wall Street Journal article. I did some more research. I then found a Washington Post piece that was a profile piece on the doctor. I reached out to the journalist and I asked her, what's the doctor like as a character? And she said he's the single most interesting man I've ever been around. And as a documentary filmmaker, those are nice words to hear, even if they're a quarter true. And so she introduced me to the doctor, and the next day I was on the phone with him, and then 2 weeks later I was in Mexico filming. But I think for a film like this, I really wanted to make an intimate film.
And what was the length of time that you filmed with him? Because I'm not even aware.
It
of
was
that.
9 months. I mean, I originally thought I was going to go down there for 1 week and get enough footage to create this juxtaposition, and then 1 week turned into 1 month, turned into 9 months. And I think my approach to him and my approach to everyone down there was really important, which was that I'm not here I have no preconceived notion of the story I want to tell. I have no agenda. I want to let you tell your story. I heard Al Maisels once say, if you end up with the story you started with, then you're not listening along the way. And I think that's good advice for life. And I think that's good advice for filmmaking, and that's something that I sort of held true to me every single day. The story constantly evolved. The doctor evolved as a character. And I think, what it really allowed me to get in, these very intimate scenes that I was able to get was time, spending just a lot of time with him. I think I had 140 shoot days. I basically lived there for 2 weeks of every month for 9 months.
Extraordinary. Cartel Land is going to be playing tomorrow night at 9:15 p.m. I'm not sure which theater. You can check that out. Thank you very much, all. I'm going to swap out these panelists for our last group. Is that do I see Michael Moore in the back there? We'll bring him down for his. So I'm going to let's see. I got Stanley Nelson, Alex Gibney. Who am I? Kirby Dick. Where's Kirby Dick? Oh, here we go. Stanley Nelson. I'm going to start with you and your film, The Black Panthers: Vanguard of the Revolution. It's playing here on Sunday at 11:45 a.m. Actually, I'm not sure if it's playing here at this theater. It's playing at a theater at the Doc NYC. I think it is here. Sunday at 11:45 a.m. In Black Panthers: Vanguard of Revolution, you're interviewing everyone from Panthers who were in gunfights with cops to the cops and law enforcement themselves. And you're talking about an incredibly contentious history with the Black Panthers. So when you're interviewing people, whether it's a Black Panther or a cop, about this contentious history, do you see it as your job to challenge them and try to give a kind of devil's advocate point of view to their viewpoint, or when you're interviewing, are you just kind of letting them talk and give their point of view without challenging them?
I should say, it's a little bit of both. It took 7 years to make this film, so we spent 4 years trying to put the whole film together, then probably 3 years in production. And we really wanted to have cops. We wanted to have FBI agents. We wanted to get that side. But I think by having both sides, we're that's doing the pushing for us, if that makes any sense. So the Panthers are telling their story, the cops are telling their story, and that's it. If I feel like there's somebody who's telling me something that I don't believe, or I just want to get a little more clarification on, then I'll push. But I'm not sure that I pushed the cops too far. I'm not trying to get them to change their minds. They're not, they're cops. They're not going to change their minds.
So you spent many years putting the story together. The thing about the Black Panther story is it's not one story, and I think what this film does so skillfully is give a big picture of the Black Panther movement across the country. There's a story that takes place in Oakland, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in New York. Talk about how you made those choices. I mean, you could have made a Black Panthers documentary just about Oakland that would easily fill the time you have. Talk about your decision to tell all these stories and how you manage that.
Well, we wanted to give a scope of the Panther movement, so we wanted to talk about the Panthers. The Panthers started in Oakland, so we knew Oakland was there. We wanted to talk about New York, but there were great stories. There's a great story of the Panther 21 in New York who all get acquitted. Chicago was very different from anywhere else because Fred Hampton was the leader in Chicago, who was kind of he was the one. Everybody loved Fred Hampton, and he was going to change things, and he really tried to have this kind of what he called the Rainbow Coalition in Chicago, and he was murdered, and it was a very clear murder. And one of the great things about Fred Hampton's story is that Mike Gray, a filmmaker, was following Fred Hampton at the time and was in the middle of making a film about Fred Hampton when he was murdered. So that was a natural. We talk about the L.A. shootout. There were a number of different shootouts with the Panthers and the police, but the L.A. shootout was a little different because, as you see in the film, the Panthers had fortified the office. They had actually put dirt in between the outer and the inner walls and lined up sandbags. So the police are shooting in, but the bullets aren't doing any good. So this gun battle goes on for 5.5 hours. And the press got there, and this was, back in '69 when, the police weren't as sophisticated as they are now, and they let the press get close enough to actually film, so you see the bullets going in and out, and there were cops that we found who were there, and there were Panthers who we found who were inside shooting out, so we could really tell that story. So we wanted to let that be the story of the shootouts, so we didn't. And then there was a Chicago shootout, and there was this shootout, and this shootout. But this story stood for all the different shootouts.
So, as I said, Black Panthers Vanguard the Revolution will be playing here on Sunday at 11:45 a.m. Stanley will be here to talk more about that film. Kirby Dick, I want to talk about your film, The Hunting Ground. This is a film about rape on campus. And what you really show is strong efforts to cover up that there's this rape culture, that there's that educational institutions have really not done enough by far to protect women on campus from this. This I was asking Stanley about the contentious history of the Black Panthers. You're also wading into incredibly contentious grounds here. There are lawsuits around these cases. Fact finding is always contested. How did you pick the cases that you were going to choose on? You like Stanley covers many cases in the Black Panther. You cover many cases in Hunting Ground, which really serves to make this powerful case that it's not a single incident here. It's a it's a crisis. Talk about how you made your decisions about cases to pick.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we wanted to convey that this is a problem across all universities. So we were investigating cases at dozens of universities as they were happening. And one of the ways we wanted to convey that was, we wanted geographic diversity. So, there's Harvard Law, there's Notre Dame, a religious school, there's a couple of public schools, Berkeley, and we also wanted, we wanted just this kind of range so that when people walked out, they realized that this isn't a film about 5 schools where there are rape problems, but in fact, it's a problem across the country. Then also, we wanted to find cases that kind of presented a range of different kind of cases as well. I think it's something similar that all documentary filmmakers do when they're looking at subjects. And we wanted to find people that were compelling, and we wanted to find people that, given that this is contentious territory, that would have the strength to go out. And we have very compelling, strong, central characters. But we were surprised when we went out with the film how much blowback there was. I mean, this has been silenced for so long, and in some ways I feel, there's no question that, there's misogyny and sexism in this culture, but in some ways I think rape and sexual assault is the dark core of that. And so, when we went out with this film, we saw this incredible pushback against the subjects, against the film. And
can you elaborate, like where is that pushback coming from?
It's coming from schools. It's coming from journalists. It's coming from law professors. It's really. I mean, we were really, really surprised. And what this showed us, and people are questioning the statistics, and the statistics have been very established. It's approximately 1 in 5. Nearly every school comes out with that number. Every national, except one outlier, study comes out with that number. So what you're seeing is people who aren't experts in research, they're not scientists, and they're not experts in sexual assault, are making these pronouncements that these things aren't true, which is very reminiscent of the climate change argument. And then these are, the climate change denialists, where the statistics were there, but there was a whole segment of society that was denying it. So we saw that there were these these rape denialists that were out there that were going after filmmakers, were going after subjects in particular. And what's really tragic about that is not only does it, mislead the public and give an impression that this isn't a problem, and then therefore this country can't solve it, but what you need most of all is survivors coming forward. Because if survivors don't come forward, this will continue to be as silenced as it has been for so long. So these denialists are actually contributing to the problem. And so we right now are engaged in the film, it just didn't stop. I mean, after the release, and usually with documentaries, or usually with all films, it kind of dies down. But it's been this ongoing and really shocking. I mean, I've kind of walked away much more pessimistic about society than when I started making this film.
If you want to see The Hunting Ground, it's going to be playing shortly after this panel in the next theater at 12:15. Kirby and his producer Amy will be here for a conversation afterwards to talk more about it. I want to turn to Evgeny. I'm always stumbling over your name, Evgeny. Afineevsky. Okay. His film is Winter on Fire, Ukraine's Fight for Freedom, which I was really proud to show at the Toronto Film Festival this year, and we showed it at our Stranger Than Fiction season earlier. And it showed last night here at Doc NYC. So, Evgeny, your film is set in Ukraine. You're looking at these 3 months where Ukrainians rose up, and it was a people's uprising that led to the overthrow of President Yanukovych from roughly November 2013 to February 2014, and the film is the film, I think, is an optimistic one. Kirby talks about walking away with incredible pessimism. Your film, I think, embodies an optimism about the power of people to rise up and make a change. In the big picture of looking at recent Ukrainian history, you could make a different film that would probably have a pessimistic outlook on events. Can you talk about your choice to tell the story you told and to give it that feeling?
Thank you, Tom, for having me here between all these amazing people. Thank you for supporting the movie and bringing us to Toronto and to on the festival. Again, thank you. You know, since I arrived to Ukraine in November, I think this optimistic feeling, this feeling of hope for the future, for the better future, this feeling of unity and humanity was kind of around me and around these people. They created this feeling. They been optimistic from the first day when they came to the square, from the creation of this youth movement till the last day, even being under the bullets, being under the police batons, when people been kidnapped, or we've been actually cold water was spread over them and tear gas, all these horrible things, they still been optimistic and they still stand their ground. So I think the choice of being optimistic, it was their choice. And I think me as the true filmmaker, I just try to portray them or basically allow them to be in the movie. I was following them and I was allowing also them to tell their own stories. And I think it's not was as much as my choice. I think I was just trying to be a true filmmaker and portray true facts that happened there. Because you know what, this optimism you can see in the movie by all these musical elements that you have there. Every day they had concerts there. Despite this military situation, you can see a girl in my movie playing piano in the between protesters and the police in the middle of this battlefield. You can see the reaction of these people to these horrifying laws that they prohibited to wear protective gear. They reacted with the great sense of humor and started to wear cooking pads and all these kind of stuff. So they were human and they were optimistic from the beginning. So I think, again, the choice was done by them, and I was just being a filmmaker trying to document the history as it happened and tell their own story. I was just taking and filming as it was and bringing their optimism to the screen.
And am I right that you're getting ready to go to Ukraine to show the film there?
Yeah, actually, I was invited by my crew, I had a huge crew. I had 28 filmmakers surrounding me there, 28 cinematographers, I think it's a huge crew. And I was invited by them, by my entire team there, to present the movie on the 2nd anniversary of Maidan. And yes, I'm next week. Even it's danger. I know that my friends here kind of, why are you doing this? It's danger because I was born in Russia. I'm kind of enemy of Russian state. We had suspicion that I was poisoned recently. Actually, when I came from Toronto, I was hospitalized. And Russia famous for that. So the previous president was poisoned, so they assuming. But you know,
where's your water bottle? I don't want to drink out of that one.
It's okay. But you know what? I think me as filmmaker, I want to bring this movie to them. It's their movie. It's very important to them. I want to be with them for this important day, and I want to see their reaction, and I want to see how important to them for their history and to hear their thoughts and thoughts of the people.
Alex Gibney, you're no stranger to going after kind of powerful interests. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to poison you, but maybe you've got that to look forward to. In your new film, Going Clear, Scientology and the Prison of Belief, where you're working with the writer Lawrence Wright, who'd written a book on this subject, you're going up against the Church of Scientology, if I can call it a church. They call themselves a church. Which is known for its incredible pushback. That I continue to see hate tweets from Scientology backed organizations directed at you, unless that's part of your awards campaign. You've got a well-heeled supporter there. But it's one thing for us to know that Scientology is tough to go up against. Can you elaborate on just how tough it is? Like what is the opposition you face there?
Well, I can, but first let me pause. I just want to also expand a little bit on what Davis said earlier. I mean, not only is this therapeutic, but I've found myself in the last 30, 60 now, almost 90 minutes, learning so much. I feel like whoa, I've been fucking up for a long time. All these incredible filmmakers doing with such a thoughtful approach to what they're doing in their craft. So I hope everybody here appreciates this 90-minute program. Thank you for putting it together. So, look, the Church of Scientology, both in terms of what they try to do with their religion, but also in terms of how they come after you, the Church of Scientology tries to impose a matrix of thought on its followers. And part of the mechanism for coming after me and critics, and really more savagely, the critics who left the church, who are the ones they're really going after. And a lot of what their criticism is designed to do is to play games with your head, to get inside your mind, to destabilize you, to make you think that there's always somebody following you. In some cases, there is. And I know that a lot of the people who are in the film are followed regularly by private investigators who make it clear to them that they're being followed so that they can be intimidated. It's all about kind of trying to destabilize you psychologically. Luckily for me, I think that, I was warned by a number of the members inside the church that the best defense against people getting inside your head is not to allow them in. In other words, if you understand that's what they're doing, then it can be a defense. But also a lot of what they're doing...
Let me pause there, because, it's easy to say that, so like, don't let them get inside your head, but, the mechanisms to get inside your head are... can be lawsuits, can be propaganda, can be personally targeted at you. Can be. I remember you saying at Sundance Film Festival that there were photographers from hired by the Church of Scientology taking pictures of some of your subjects getting off the plane. So whether or not you want to let them get in your head or not, they can get in your head just by like pissing you off. Like you get a lawsuit. Well, that pisses you off. That's something you got to deal with. Disrupts the rest of your day, if not your year. So can you kind of elaborate about not letting them get inside your head?
Well, I think one thing is being prepared. The Church of Scientology has a history of intimidation. And I'm hoping that a lot of other powerful people aren't, taking a page from their playbook. 20 or so years ago, they sued Time Magazine, and the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. But I believe it was the most expensive media lawsuit in history. Since then, they used the threat of litigation to go after anybody who tries to criticize them. Now, we have received an avalanche of legal lawyers, and I give tremendous credit to HBO in terms of both being prepared for that, also hiring outside counsel to be able to look to that. So if you're confronting an organization like Scientology, you have to be prepared for that kind of legal avalanche. And that in and of itself can be incredibly difficult pragmatically and financially and psychologically to some extent. We had to spend, in order to get insurance worldwide, we had to spend close to $200,000 just on insurance. And that's not something we discovered until we got down the road. Not here, but abroad, because there are many countries in which Lawrence Wright's book is not available. It can't be published, or it won't be published because people are afraid. And indeed, none of the major networks in this country would license us any material that had to do with the Church of Scientology. Why? Because the Church of Scientology was very litigious, and they just didn't feel that the risk was worth the reward. So, yeah, there were real consequences, but I think their real goal, and recently I've been confronted in parking lots and so forth and so on, people trying to destabilize me psychologically. I think what I was trying to say was, while there are real consequences and risks, what you need to keep in mind is, if you understand what their end game is, which is to get inside your head, or to actually speak to their own adherents, which is saying, we're fighting this evildoer, he's an evildoer, don't pay attention, then it helps you defend yourself.
And Going Clear is going to be playing at the festival on Wednesday, November 18th at 9:30, and Alex will be here to introduce that screening. So all the other films that we've talked about today have been out in release. The final film I want to talk about is Where to Invade Next. It played last night at the festival, previously played at the New York Film Festival and other festival. How many people have seen Where to Invade Next so far? Okay. And it's going to open on December 23rd, Christmas movie this year. Michael, people who have seen films like Fahrenheit 9/11, Bowling for Columbine, Roger Me, know you as someone who there's a lot of times in your films where you're going after, you're going after a specific person, Roger Smith in Roger and Me, or your confrontation with Charlton Heston in Bowling for Columbine. Usually those people are personifying something much larger in the culture. What happened, or Where to Invade Next? Where to Invade Next is a different kind of film. You've described it as a different kind of film. You've described it as your happy movie. Can you talk to me about, what did you set out to make a different kind of movie than you had made in the past, and why?
Well, thanks, Tom. Again, I want to join everybody in thanking you and Raphael for putting this on. And I've seen these films. These are 4 incredible movies, and everybody else you've seen here today, I hope everybody gets a chance to see them. Plus, there are so many other great documentaries this year. This is such a good year. Those of us who are members of the Academy, we've had these boxes or envelopes of movies, and it's been one wonderful film after another. So congratulations to everybody who's made these films, and the others who haven't seen them, please see them. I also just want to say Stanley worked on my TV show many years ago. Was it TV Nation or The Awful Truth? It was TV Nation, yeah. And so I've known him for a long time. And I just wanted to mention this. He brought up Fred Hampton, who was murdered in his sleep in Chicago. This is an excellent, excellent movie. But there was a second person murdered in Fred's apartment. And I've always been committed to saying his name since this happened, because I remember it happening when I was a teenager, because the second person was from Flint, Michigan. His name was Mark Clark. The police just came in and murdered both of these individuals in their sleep. What was your question? Oh, Mike's happy movie. Yeah. I think somebody on my crew told you that because that's what I told them. Because we just deal with a lot of things that just bum a lot of people out, and so we had a couple of thoughts. What if we made a movie that was the no problems, all solutions movie? All of us get criticized but what's the solution to this problem, Kirby? It's like, why didn't you show us that? It's like, the doctor who unfortunately tells you have cancer, and then you get mad at the doctor for not having the cure for cancer. You don't get mad at the doctor for that. You need documentary films to show you what the problems are. I also wanted to make a movie about the United States and its condition without shooting a single frame of film or video in the United States, and so that's what the film does.
And how did you get that? Why was that important to you?
Because I think I don't know if it was important. I think we just wanted the challenge of it. It's kind of a what if thing. I mean, don't you all? Some of you have done this for a long time. To keep our mojo going, or just everybody knows this at work or whatever. If there isn't a challenge or there isn't something different, to just do the same old is boring. And
you're good.
Oh, okay.
Whoever's talking out there, tell them to shut up.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was. It was being
the people trying to get in Alex's head.
No, it's being translated into. Yes. Right. His Ukrainian friend is back there, and it's being translated. How do you say Mike's happy movie? But no, I think it was just say, wouldn't this be interesting if we did this and didn't we expose what's going on here without being here? It just seemed like a
Look, I mean, we want to have fun doing this too, and I think when you see the film, hopefully that comes across. You know, where a lot of us are, you know, most of us are either Irish or Jewish, so we're full of a lot of dark humor. But you know, it's I don't know. Have I answered your question, or I don't know. I mean, I think you can. I think I've always felt that the best comedians throughout history, whether it was Lenny Bruce or Groucho Marx or Richard Pryor or George Carlin or Charlie Chaplin, if you know anything about them, they were very angry people. And but I think the angrier they were, the better their comedy was. And so I'm pretty angry. And it doesn't show on the surface because I've chosen to make a comedy. But I've seen it. We saw it in Canada, but then we saw it with Americans. So when you see it with an American audience, you hear parents, I hear people start to cry during Finland when you see how they do their schools.
You will cry if you're a parent and you contrast American schools to Finland schools.
Yeah, right.
At least as your film depicts it.
But see, that's the thing though. That's the trick of the film is that I don't really show you American schools. You know, I'm showing you, I guess what I want to convey to the public is that this isn't rocket science. We can have better schools. We can not poison our kids. Everybody should have 4 weeks paid vacation. They don't let you in the EU unless that's the law in your country, that everybody who's an employee is guaranteed a 4-week paid vacation. You don't get into the European Union unless you have a law on the books that says mothers get X number of months off with pay when they have a baby. I mean, the rest of the civilized world lives in a civilized manner. That's why they're called the civilized world. And we keep calling ourselves that, but we don't act like it. And we've spent the last decade and a half committing acts of war and war crimes against the world. And somehow we've gotten away with not having to pay for it. And the Germans and the Austrians are cleaning up our mess for us by taking in hundreds of thousands of refugees from a part of the world that we unraveled, the political and religious infrastructure of these countries. And then we just sit back here and go, you know, oh, you know, Supergirl is starting, you know, or whatever Jeb Bush's favorite TV show was. But it was like, you know, I mean, it's just, who the fuck do we think we are that we get away with this? So I don't sound very happy, but I'm hopeful because in this film, I lay out a blueprint of tried and true things, not new ideas in these countries, but things that they've made all the mistakes for us. They've done the drug trials. They've done the trial and error. Portugal's had 15 years of not putting a single person in prison for using or possessing drugs. 15 years, and they've seen their drug use go down, drug crime go down, and they don't get to use the law as we do to commit acts of racism against certain people in our country. So I think this is, in my opinion, what I hope I've done is created something that makes you want to leave the theater and on the way out at the Goobers and Raisinets stand, ask for a pitchfork or a torch.
Well, I'm sure your new distribution company will be getting those into theaters. Thank you all for coming. I hope you get to come back and see a lot more. I hope you see a lot of films this week. Panelists, I'm going to bring you up here for a group photo.